Over the past few years, the United Workers' Party has found convenience in redefining what the W in UWP stands for: workers, or more collectively, the workers' class. Last week, Stephen Favre, the endorsed candidate for Castries North, played his part in the rebranding of the party, making commentary on a political strategy that he termed class warfare.
I worked harder with Prime Minister Chasney during those 2.5 days than I've done with anybody else. Now, I could tell you, and I could contrast that where other ministers have come and I've received them, and how they've spent their time. Let's leave it at that, right? Let's leave it at that. And what is this about white man? Since when we've gone there? Who cares? If Alan Chasney is the best person for the job, I don't care if he's white, pink, green, or once his heart is in the right place, and I believe his heart is in the right place, I will support him. And I have every doubt, I have every confidence that those people who claim not to be white, who are enriching themselves whilst they should be in the service of people, they should be ashamed. Using invective and racial slurs and using class warfare to achieve a political outcome, to divide this country further. So the Labour Party used very Marxist, communist approaches. They decapitated the leader. So what has been done to Alan Chasney is not different to what was said about Sir John. It's worse. Sir John was worse.
Throughout the Caribbean region, independence movements sprung out of the region's people and leaders finding solidarity in the world's labor movement, paralleling the conflict between capital and workers to the conflict between colonizing powers and colonies, or Europe and the United States and the Caribbean. And Dr. Tennyson Joseph has studied this history extensively.
Caribbean labor movement shaped the independence project. So most of our political parties, if you look at it, all of them have the word labor or worker in their names, unless until a little later they began to call themselves nationalist parties. But in St. Lucia, both major political parties call themselves workers' parties or labor parties. So because they're all rooted in the same agrarian, worker-oriented laborist with lesser or stronger tendencies. And in the current independent 2025, that is where a debate exists among, let's call it some kind of class contestation around these parties. So if you look at the types, you would see, I'm not going to mention names or point fingers, but you would see certain elements are contesting for control of the various parties that had labor-oriented and worker-oriented origins.
The connection between wealth and property was stronger in the past than it is today. The right to vote was originally for landowners. It was only through the agitation of trade unionists like George F. L. Childs that full adult suffrage was achieved. For decades, this was interpreted as socialism and communism. After the demise of the Soviet Union, the people began to expect St. Lucia's government to be equipped to make the island a full and competitive participant in the global economy. Dr. Joseph calls this neoliberal assumptions of government.
One of the other dangers in that, and we've seen it in St. Lucia, and it happened when, around the time when what I call the emergence of this claim that it was businessmen and economists and so forth, people with money who could govern. Because we had moved into an era when there was assumption that because we're moving into a free market capitalist kind of economy, that only people with business are supposed to be rulers or governors, and there was an argument that you must run a government like you run a business. All of these arguments were swirling around the time of the what I call the rise of neoliberal assumptions about what is the appropriate role for the state, whether the private sector should govern, all of those kinds of questions.
Within this context, it becomes clearer that the W in UWP and the L in SLP should mean the same thing essentially: the centering of the workers' class in both of St. Lucia's political parties. What Stephen Favre referred to as class warfare would be better understood as class solidarity, which throughout St. Lucia's history has united the most disadvantaged in society across political lines. Critics, such as Dr. Joseph, have been misconstrued as discriminatory, misquoted as claiming that Alan Chasney should not be Prime Minister because he is a businessman, when their point is more so that the electorate should not expect governments to be run as businesses, nor should they expect businesses to be the most prioritized in society. The deliberate removal of the class consciousness that the UWP stands for from the very center of its own name represents a backward step to a way of life that the UWP of 1964 would be most indignant at. For Choice News Now, I am Sienna Dalso.